Hey folks, Bernie here. So if you're an independent co-working space owner or community manager, come to Unreasonable Connection. There'll be a link in the show notes to this. It is a 1 hour online, no pictures, no panels, just small online rooms with real people like you who run co-working spaces. We talk honestly about what's going on. It's not recorded. There's no sponsors. There's no product placement. And together you will figure it out with the other 3 or 4 people in your room. It's informal but structured, so you'll actually meet people and not just share a screen. I would say it's the anecdote to awkward networking. In fact, it's the networking event for people that don't like networking. And you can click the link in the show notes. It's online, it's free, and hope to see you there. Now, on with the show. Hello folks, and welcome to this Tuesday's edition of the Co-working Values podcast. And in our studio today, we have Adèle. Adèle, what are you known for and what would you like to be known for?
Hi. I guess I'm known for being a researcher about co-working space and third place, but I would like to be known for my urban foraging skills.
Is that when? So I was going to ask you this when we were talking before. When did you get into the urban foraging? Like, was that?
About over a year ago. It was for a research project, but now I'm really into it personally. So yeah.
And do you find these things because someone turns up to your office in university and says, "We need to know more about urban foraging," or is this just your curiosity for things you stumble across in your day?
Yeah, more the later. No, it's definitely my curiosity and I don't know. Yeah, I like weird stuff and I like people who do unexpected things, and I follow them.
Where do you research these things? Do you go on social media, or do you read magazines, or do you stop people in the street?
Yeah, it's kind of progressive. I guess I would start with social media and then read magazines and news outlets to see what's out there. But then I like to go on the field. So I like to experience my research myself. So I do ethnography. So I spend prolonged time with the people whom I'm interviewing or researching. I interview them for hours and I learn what they do myself. So foraging, I took workshops and classes about foraging. But I do the same with all of my projects, really.
And why? And then we'll get to the co-working bit. Like, why is there more foraging or less foraging? Is it like an in vogue thing, or is it a necessity for the future of humanity?
More and more, it's getting traction. I think it has always been there, of course, but I think there is what we're looking at actually is that there are more and more influencers on social media who are trying to surf this wave. It's a bit of survivalists, I don't know, but it's also very much about finding new ways to feed yourself without relying too much on supermarkets and processed food, I guess.
I'm gonna have to shout out to everybody to go and listen to our 2 episodes with Chantel, the barefoot gardener, live in London. Who introduced? I think she first introduced this to our ecosystem here. So we met on the research group for collaborative spaces in 2016, I think.
Yep.
In London. And can you say what the research group for collaborative spaces is? Because I'm always like trying to big up the work of the academic community in.
Yes. Sure. I think we don't even know ourselves, but we're a group of scholars who do research on new ways of working, collaborative space, and people who want to work differently. And the group was started to, well, the goal was to mix academic research with practitioners. So we do events where we walk around together, we visit spaces, and we talk about what we see and how we can theorize a little bit about what's going on in the world of work. And we've started doing that in 2015, I think. It was François-Xavier de Vaujany, a French professor, who started that, and now it's big. And yeah, we have one conference every year, like a symposium, and several events throughout the year where we just meet and walk around.
That walking around thing, not even shamelessly. I stole that on purpose. When we do some, when it allows London co-working London co-working assembly events, we walk between venues like we did
Mm.
in 2016, because that little, like, sitting in a room and then all having to get up and talk to each other with a question of purpose in between venues is I know, really interesting, and that gets the best feedback out of all the things we do. We could have Bruce Springsteen and the Foo Fighters play at a London co-working assembly event, but walking between sessions gets a much better feedback
Yeah.
than rock stars. And the other thing is so when COVID came along, which is 5 years ago now, the last London co-working assembly event we did in person before COVID was the one with you and Letitia, and that was when you were you in mid research for the third place paper?
Exactly. Yes, we were almost going to submit that. So we had finished the findings and wrapping up and writing, and we submitted in June. So like just a few months during COVID, we submitted it, and it was published a year later. Yeah.
And we'll link to that in the show notes. But what was attractive about that third place concept for you two?
It was interesting actually because we started this project long before COVID, and then it just became a thing because of COVID. We were puzzled by how there was a mismatch between what the academic literature was saying about third places as viewing it as spaces of socializing, of community and togetherness, but very much non-work. And what we saw in London was very different in that a lot of people would work in the third places, like cafes. And we didn't buy this discourse that was saying basically that people who worked in cafes were only sort of silencing it and being very detrimental to the cafes as just occupying, a table for the whole day with only paying just one coffee. And we kind of suspected that there was something else to it. And yeah, so we investigated that.
That was well. Who's the? It wasn't on the tip of my tongue that I think it was a researcher who came up with the name third place.
Oldenburg.
That's it,
Yes.
Oldenburg. I always thought, until you said that there, I always thought that was just. I didn't think when he came up with it, it was like, oh, we'll all go here and work. I just always thought a third place was where we meet to do stuff together.
Yes, that's it. That's the theory. So the third place is, well, it's not the first place, which is your home, and it's not the second place, which is where you work. So it's a place that's dedicated to socializing, like a pub, definitely, like a public house, right? So you would meet and socialize and all of that. But even then, when he theorized this, and I don't have the date at the top of my head, but he kind of warned against the fear of silencing. And at the time, he took the example of someone who would bring their newspapers to the pub and read. And he was kind of explaining if we all start to do that, then the public place or the third place will be silenced. Um, so yeah, so I think that was the start of the theory. And I guess now the third places can not only be just places for socializing, it's very much hybrid in terms of the activities that we do in there. And that's what we showed in the papers that we did with Letitia. We looked at customer workers, so people who worked in the third places, and how they changed the third place market, what they brought in terms of value for the third place, and who were these people basically.
That's the thread that I like. The language you use in this, I find like, oh yeah, it's like someone said App Store to me, and I'd never heard of the App Store, but when I saw it, I knew exactly what you meant. So like customer workers, and there's I can't remember what the other. It will probably come up in our conversation, but all these things people do. Do you folks sit around and think of these titles, or do they just come up naturally in conversation? Oh, look, they're like a customer
Mhm.
and a worker at the same time. They're like paying to work here. That's a bit weird, isn't it? Is that how the thought process goes?
Yes, it takes a long time. Well, to be honest, this customer worker, I think we could have come up with something more catchy. but we played around, right, with like customer or work customer. Well, we played around with that and thought, okay, maybe not another neologism because that would be too much. But yeah, the idea is, how do you do when there is no word to describe what you're seeing in your data? And so you have to sort of come up with concepts. Like maybe the second one you were wondering about is the productive third place. It's when the third places that we looked at that were actively segmenting and targeting customer workers.
No, it was something to do with like neo consumptive thing. I don't want to get into it because I'll be
Yeah.
like waste 5 minutes of me trying to rack into my head. But because I listen to things, it pops into my head. So do you think um, co-working spaces solve a problem for cafes, or
Yeah.
because when you look at it, people are kind of like doing the same thing, and sometimes people say to me like, "Why do I need to pay to be in a co-working space when I could just go and buy a coffee in a cafe?"
Yeah, I
And
think it's very different targets, very different segments, and they're not attracting the same people. So in the third places, it's mostly independent workers or people who just need an office for a day, but nothing too specific. They might have an office elsewhere, or they might just like to work from home, but sometimes they cannot work from home, or sometimes they're traveling and they just need an office, just for a few hours on their holidays to achieve something or to focus on something. So it's very different from the co-working space public, which is much more about independent workers who really need the sort of place to showcase a professional identity. They need the community that the co-working will build, that the cafes don't really build. There are ways for them to do so, but it's very different. And the co-working space would attract startups, large companies who will set up innovative hubs, but not necessarily customer workers. I think it's very different.
yeah, there's like that where you said there, showcase a professional identity,
Mm.
that definitely happens. But my quest for going to a co-working space is always to be with other people, so I don't go. I know, like there's a lot of mental health for me personally. There's a lot of mental health solved by being in a place with other people, and my focus is way higher. But I do know I've definitely met a lot of people that go, I want to be in a co-working space. They wouldn't use these words, but to showcase my professional identity. I think that's interesting how we all relate to different things.
Yes, it's professional identity, but it's also the work aspect. As in, so during our research in co-working space, we've met a lot of independent workers who kind of advertise themselves as working in that and that space. And some of the co-working space have a very powerful brand. So they also benefit from the imaginaries of that co-working space brand that sort of trickles down to their own business, and that helps them reach out to new clients, customers, or business ventures. So yeah.
And I know people that have said, they work in some of those places you've researched from, and they will go, "Oh, we're in the same office
Mm,
as X company," that kind of thing.
exactly.
Yeah, or like, "Yes, we're in the same building as the BBC," and
Mhm.
"Oh, really? I thought you were just a graphic designer." Um, and then where I am guessing that the whole consumptive work idea grew out of the third place research. Is that right? And you're allowed
um
to say no. But
Not really. Yeah, no, it emerged much more from the co-working space research. But it could definitely be applied to the third place research now that I think about it. But it emerged from, so I conducted a lot of ethnographies, so in co-working space, sort of looking at people, and I'm a consumer researcher, so at the beginning I was looking at consumption, and consumption in the workplace is theorized as non-work previously. So first we were looking at how people were not working in the co-working space. So we were looking at yoga classes, like baking classes, all the workshops that people attend to, leisure, people who played ping pong in the co-working space, and tried to figure out the role of consumption in those spaces. And I think that's the consumptive work aspect, so is something that emerged from the data. Basically, what we were looking at is people, we weren't able to separate what we were seeing from work and the creation of productive value. And we kind of had to think of a new way to think about consumption within the workplace that accounted for this generation of value, or how consumption actually became work. So, consumptive work is the strategic use of consumption activities for work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I I'm still it takes me a long time to digest things like this, and I thought that all these things like yoga and gyms and they're like features and benefits, and then I still haven't formulated this idea, but it feels like places like bigger company. I don't want to shout anyone out, but like bigger companies will have all these um, activities you can do. They have a gym on site and everything. So basically, like you go to work, you go through the door, and you never have to leave.
Yeah.
And there's this like industrial productivity machine going on, and it feels like as a a member of a co-working space, because those things are attractive. If there's a gym in a co-working space, I'll be like, oh, I'll go there, because then I will go to the gym because I only have to go downstairs and I have to carry less stuff. But it's sort of like really, really cool and beneficial, but also slightly sinister and evil. The way
Yes.
you're kind of everything's in one place and you never have to do anything else anywhere else again.
Yes, that's exactly what we're showing. This is both very, it's empowering to have everything in one place and you don't have to move around. But what our research shows really is that because this is also work, so basically when they do yoga, it's also about finding productivity and focus. When you attend a baking class, it's also for networking, business development. There's some professional development as well, marketing, recruiting, and all of that is happening in those non-work events. And what we are showing is that when you take work into these leisure activities or wellness activities, it makes it be work, and then it's not you're not doing it for its own sake, right? It's not, we call it autotelic. So when you do a yoga class because you need to be productive at work after, and you think that it will help you do that, it kind of changes how you approach yoga, and it's not as liberating and empowering as it was before. And maybe that's the word you were trying to get later, is
Autotetic.
this neo-normative alienation.
That's it. That's the one.
Yeah,
That's the
that's it.
one. Yes.
Yeah, what we're showing is that basically there's new forms of alienation at work, is that it's not necessarily your boss telling you you have to do yoga, but it's yourself sort of thinking that if you don't do yoga, if you don't do these networking events, you might not be as good as you would like at your job, and people might not know you and all of that. So you sort of force it upon yourself to take part in all of these consumption activities in order to work, but it makes it so that it can be draining and very intense. And there is a lot of burnout as well in co-working spaces. And something that was interesting in the field work actually is that the some of the co-working managers were very much aware of the burnout situation and then the alienation in a way. But they kind of the solution was to propose more meditation and wellness within the space. So it's kind of a never-ending circle. Yeah.
And is that staff getting burnt out, or is that members getting burnt out?
Probably a little bit of both. I think in our fieldwork it was more the members, but also we interviewed less staff, and the staff, it was harder to get genuine and authentic perspective from the staff. But from the observations, so from looking at them, we kind of really show that they work a lot and beyond the what's in their work contract, basically.
Yeah, that because it's funny. There's a whole. I've always thought this is like when someone goes, "Do you want to go for a drink after work?" Like, I don't really want to go for a drink after work, but it's like absolutely sort of, it's in air quotes, it's like business development, and you never know whether something's going to come of it or not. And there is definitely a use to going. Like, so many good relationships have come from doing things with people in co-working spaces.
Yeah.
And it seems, and I'm sure you say this somewhere in like the more informal and the less strategic it is, the better it is. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
exactly the right word, but can you say a bit more about that? Because
Yes,
you're the
yes. I
person who
think
researched it all.
also because it connects to this idea of community that I know you really like to research, but it's we've had quotes, we have people telling us that basically community enables them to sell better. So I think in the bigger the co-working space, the bigger the community, the more it resembles a market, right? And a market for work, for actually to find, client freelancers to do all of that. And the less genuine and the less authentic it is. So what we're seeing in different spaces that we've looked at is that the smaller ones, the community is more makeshift, is more authentic, and maybe it leads to less leads, and business outcomes, but it's probably a little bit more enjoyable, a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I'd like that not to be true, but in my
Yeah.
experience, it is. And there was, do you know the Freelancers Union in the United States? That might
No.
have, so there's, um, uh, they did a big research project in 2018, and a big chunk of that was around people in co-working spaces. And I can't remember the exact statistic, but it's like something like of however many thousand people they interviewed, and a chunk of those all worked in co-working spaces. And 70% of the people that worked in co-working spaces said that they're so I don't want to say 90, but it was like up there, kind of their business came from the people sitting in their desks near them, and it
Yeah.
was because it was proximity.
Mm.
And so they go, so I'd be on the phone and be like, oh yeah, so you need a videographer, and Adele, yeah, because you're there and I know you get the job. And it's not kind of like old school networking, but it's just the proximity is what helps people develop business relationships.
Definitely. And the platforms as well, like the digital platform that enable to just like scan and find someone very quickly. And that there is a sense of trust that develops between businesses that are part of the same space or the same community in a way. Yeah,
What
definitely.
did you find out about that? Because is that why? I mean, I kind of know why, but like, is it because if I find you in the app, I know where to find you if it goes wrong, or is it easy to find people, or is it a trust thing? Because there must be so many different things going on there.
Yeah, there is so many different things. I think the first one is time, right? It's like it's so easy to find someone that it saves, well, what people were telling us is that it saves them so much time. Like all the business developers were saying that basically their work is very different in the co-working space and so much like facilitated. One of them told us that it's a business enablement platform, and that's really how they see it, right? Without the co-working space platform and community, their job would be harder in a way.
There's something about intent there, because there's this nuance of, yes, of course you want to grow your business and everything, but if your only reason for joining the gym is to if your only reason for joining the gym by the stock exchange in London is to bump into people who you can, sell your services to, it's a really smart move. But there's something about the intent there that's a bit like, I don't know what the word is, like ungracious. Maybe that's too cruel. But if
Mhm.
you, but at the same time, like, why, if you wanted to sell your services to those people, the obvious move to save yourself loads of time and energy is to join that gym there.
Yes, definitely. Well, I think it's also, well, that's kind of shows on the hybridity, right, of work and leisure, is that it's leisure is becoming work, but on the other side, I think what we're seeing is that our respondent also expect work to be more like leisure. So it's also like, okay, you might work outside of working hours and you might work at the gym, but at least your work is more fun. And yeah, and you're not stuck behind a desk, right? There is a sense of, I know I'm doing that, but at least it's part of this sort of lifestyle aspiration that work is becoming, yeah, a lifestyle in a way. I don't know
Fluid.
if that makes sense.
That's one of the, yeah, that's the thing I really appreciate about the way because sometimes I do end up like not working way too long and all this kind of stuff, but no one makes me. I don't have to be 9 to 5 somewhere,
Exactly.
and I can. I always tell people to do calls on WhatsApp because then I can walk and talk. And I walk around the park here doing calls, and it's just like way nicer than looking on Zoom or Google Meet. Is there anything else? Is there anything I haven't asked you about this that you're like dying to tell us?
Yeah, maybe just a conclusion on the sort of managerial sort of takeaways, of that consumptive work, because we do sort of think that it's important for workplaces to invest in consumption experiences within the workplace, like leisure or wellness or community, but keeping in mind that it is becoming work, and sometimes it's important to allow to create some boundaries and to think about inclusion. And a lot of people cannot engage in after work networking events, or that, especially if they involve alcohol and all of that. And I think for co-working space, what we're looking at is that it's important to have a discussion around how do you make these events accessible to all of the workers within the co-working space, especially those who cannot sort of go in crazy work hours, or who are in a bit of a more rigid work contract.
That's come up a lot. People who are parents,
Yeah.
and particularly mothers, because for some reason in 2025, men are allowed to stay out and women have to go home, and which I obviously don't agree with, but it's odd how that is a thing. How we as men let that happen is what I want to say there. And the alcohol thing has come up lots as well. Like, oh, we're all going down the pub. It's like, I don't drink. Why would I want to go to a pub? I don't drink, and like I will go to a pub with people. I'm not offended by pubs, and it doesn't compromise my religious values. But I would rather go for a really good coffee than sit in a pub.
Exactly.
So where can we find you? What are you working on at the moment? And so everyone knows what to expect.
At the moment, but this will not be published before a few years, right? But I'm working on people who work from home in the service industry. So if you're a hairdresser and you turn your house into a hair salon, but you have to manage your kids and your clients at the same time. I'm also working on about people who choose pluri-activity that involves farming, so part-time consultant, part-time farmer. Yeah, so basically I keep on looking at people who work differently in the new ways of working, but I try to make the move towards a bit more of the ecological transition within that, and sustainability.
You always feel like Brian Eno or David Byrne. You've got like so many little irons in the fires and projects bubbling up, and every so often this gem pops out of your desk.
I know I have way too many projects.
I do too, so I can't judge you. I love having too many projects. I just wonder what would happen if I only had one. Where's the best place to follow you and keep in touch and everything
I'm
like
on
that
LinkedIn.
online?
I guess on LinkedIn would be a good place, but I'm also on Google Scholar if you're really into academic research.
Oh yeah.
But that's, I guess, good. LinkedIn would be easier, definitely.
I'm going to link to your Google Scholar profile in the show notes.
Cool.
I really appreciate this chat, and I really appreciate your work. And I've got all your papers. I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and attention today. If you go to the show notes, we're going to link to all of Adèle's Google Scholar and LinkedIn and things like that. And we'll put a link to the research group for collaborative spaces. We've done a few projects with them in the Assembly over the years, particularly the Coworking Symposium with Sir Marco Oriol in Prague. And there is the European Freelancers Week, which is in September. There is the Workspace Design Show in London, which is next February. And there's the gigantic LinkedIn group, which is 8,000 people and not enough of you talking about co-working. All of that is in the show notes. Wherever you are in the world, be careful out there. It is a jungle.
Thank you so much, Barry. I don't know if I can say thank you or if it's over, but thank you for inviting me. It was really nice to talk to you about all of these topics.
Merci.